Thanks for joining us for the Vote Watch special leadership debate as the contest to be the next leader of the Conservative Party reaches its end in the next few days. To help those who are yet to make up their minds, we've put together a panel of guests and asked you what questions you want put to them. On the panel today, former Member of Parliament for Uxbridge and South Ruislip, Councillor Steve Tuckwell, former Conservative Councillor Dawn Melvin, and writer in The Spectator and barrister Stephen Barrett, and me, Councillor Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, who will be host, trying to keep our panel in order. With the crowning of a new Conservative leader just a few days away, we'll be discussing who exactly that crown should go to. Should it be the outspoken Kemi Badenoch or the ECHR exiteer Robert Jenrick? Thanks to everyone for sending your questions in advance. So let's crack on. So, first question for my panel. Who are you voting for and why? And first, let's go to Dawn.
So I'm voting for Robert Jenrick. I decided it was a tough one, to be honest, because I had respect for most of the candidates that were running. I'm very, very fond of James Cleverly, and disappointed that James didn't get to the end. But having said that, I think Rob is the most straight talking of the people that are remaining. And I also was a huge Boris Johnson supporter right the way back to Vote Leave. And from my point of view, Robert is the only person I would have voted for at this point.
That's really interesting. Is there anything that you don't like about Kemi, or is it more attracted to Rob of all the choices?
Well, I'm quite happy to talk about the elephant in the room, which lots of people won't. I ran an enormous company. Loyalty means an awful lot to me. I don't think that people that would have worked for me over the years would always have agreed with me. But when you've got senior managers or directors or whatever, in public, you have to have a united front. That's how companies work. And any issues that you get, you keep in private. And I was absolutely disgusted with Kemi Badenoch's behaviour during the removal or orchestrated things that led to the removal of Boris Johnson. And I'm afraid, from my point of view, I believe that if someone's capable of doing that once, they're capable of doing it again. So, a sort of survival of the fittest attitude. And that's not what we needed at that time. And now we have a Labour government because of the situation that happened within the Conservative Party. So that's why I feel if you voted for Boris, between the two of them, the only person to vote for is Robert Jenrick.
Okay, no, that's really interesting. Steve Tuckwell, obviously, I believe you've come out for Team Kemi. I just wanted to get your comments on that and obviously why you're supporting Kemi as well.
Yeah, well, good afternoon, everybody. And yes, I have already voted for Kemi in this leadership contest. But I will say that I think all six candidates that have been whittled down by my former colleagues to the final two all have amazing qualities and will no doubt play a part in the party going forward in opposition and hopefully into government in the next general election. But my vote goes to Kemi because she was my boss during my time in Parliament. I was her private secretary in the Department of Business and Trade. And I saw firsthand, working with Kemi on a day-to-day basis, how she brought a fresh and dynamic perspective that the party desperately needs. And now she's unafraid to challenge the status quo. She speaks her mind and she is deeply rooted in Conservative principles. So my vote has already gone to Kemi, and I'm pleased to be able to speak on her behalf in this afternoon's discussion.
And specifically on the points that Dawn mentions about party loyalty and towing the line, do you feel there were any concerns with that with Kemi when you were obviously a member of Parliament before the general election?
Well, I wasn't a member of Parliament when what Dawn has referred to happened, sort of nearly 5 years ago now, or was it 3 years ago, whenever it was. So I think there's a lot of water that's gone under the bridge. There's a lot of water that's gone under the bridge since then, and I think we need to be looking forward. And again, my seat was Boris's former seat, so I have a very close relationship with Boris as well. I still talk to him on a regular basis, but I think we need to be looking forward now. And for me, Kemi Badenoch is the person who can take the party forward.
Now, Stephen Barrett, obviously, you won't be voting in this, but you've previously said that you're neutral on this matter. So I just want to quickly go about why there's this need for the new leader, obviously with what's happened with the Conservatives. Where do you think it all went wrong for the Conservative Party?
Well, a lot of it went wrong for the party in exactly the same way it's now going wrong for the current government. Okay, and we made a massive mistake in 2016 with the reaction to the referendum. And I do have a vote in this leadership election, but I'm remaining publicly neutral. And that's because I believe in the constitutional concept of the secret ballot. It's really important that we have the secret ballot. And that's so that once we get a result, we can all heal and come together. So the second most important thing after secret ballot is the idea of losers' consent. We had no losers' consent to the referendum, and it almost tore the country apart. And what this leader's going to need is losers' consent from the other one. So I'd like to see magnanimity from the leader. So charm and graciousness and accepting, the defeated opponents, not carrying on to attack them. And I'd like to see losers' consent from the loser, real losers' consent. Because unless we heal that, the right is never going to heal. And you're not really ever going to be able to govern this country again. We're heading towards a very dark and dangerous place. And this government, I think, is about to tear itself apart on exactly the same thin-skinned, narcissistic basis of if you're not with us, you're against us, which, by the way, is the motto of the Sith, and it destroys stuff. It's really stupid as an idea.
And I mean, obviously, the last proven winner for the Conservative Party was Boris Johnson. His name's already come up, and we're only a couple of minutes into this. I mean, Stephen, do you think we'd just be better bringing Boris back, perhaps?
Well, I mean, Boris has to make up his own decisions. I've not seen. It really is for him. We need a solution to the problems that we face. So what we've had for the last 30 years is very shallow politics, really very form-based, not substance-based. Politics really of how you look, politics of identity politics, just politics that isn't really substantive. And yet we've now got, and that was fine in the mid-90s. Look, I remember the mid-90s. Everything was great. The economy was booming. Everything was fine. Public services, just everything was great. Everything now is falling apart. So we need the opposite style of politics. And whether Boris is the person to bring that back, whether one of these two candidates can do it, but somebody has to unite the right and then do substantive politics, which means real reform, proper. I mean, I call for a great restoration. My great friend David Starkey calls for another great reform act. But we need something because everything is broken.
That's, I mean, one of our panel has already said the close connection that you've got with Boris. Obviously, Steve Tuckwell, your seat used to be the seat of Boris's. And obviously, I remember coming and helping you in the Uxbridge and South Ruislip by-election. I mean, do you feel that maybe the party does need to go back to Boris, or is there a bit of Boris in Kemi, perhaps, that you see and that's what we want to go forward with?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sat in the constituency office now doing this call here in Uxbridge, and I think Boris's name is not on the ballot paper, and I think we need to be really focused on. We've got two good candidates in front of us, and there are nuances and there are particular differences in both of the approaches. And I think what Stephen has just absolutely said there is right. Whoever wins this contest when it's announced next Saturday needs to get right behind whoever is the winner. I was asked so many times during my time in Parliament, which of the 5 families are you a member of? And I used to take offence to that question because I was in the Conservative family. I wasn't a One Nation. I wasn't with the other 4 families that they have floating around with various little, groups and meetings in corridors and the like. So it's really important, as Stephen has said, that whoever wins, that we get right behind them and we really focus on, I hate to use the word reform, and I'm sure it will come up a bit later on, but we do need to be looking at how we can renew the party and all of the challenges that this country is facing, because the political landscape has shifted, immensely in the last 20, 30 years.
Dawn, would you bring back Boris?
I think that's a decision for Boris Johnson. I don't think anyone can imagine what he was put through and what he's been through since. So that would be a decision for him and his family, jointly and severally. From my point of view, I think whoever it is, I completely agree with Stephen. Everybody needs to come together. But I do think we need to be realistic about this. You're not going to find another Boris Johnson. There isn't another Boris Johnson. He crosses bridges that no one else seems to cross. And if one or both of those candidates, whoever's lucky enough to win, needs to harness that a little bit more, it needs to be less I don't think Rob does this. Sorry I'm not being cheeky about Kemi. I believe Rob is much more we and Kemi's much more I. And what Boris did was he introduced everybody to the sort of refreshing idea that it wasn't about him, it was about all of us. Everything he was doing and everything he was saying was for all of us, and we could all be part of that. And I think as we move forward as Conservatives, very much, I think Stephen's absolutely spot on with everything he said. We need to realize it isn't about us and them. It's about this country and making sure we do the best for everybody, regardless of where they sit in the spectrum of finances, religion, colour, finances. It's got nothing to do with it. We're all in this together, and we need to fight to make sure that everybody on an equal basis gets the best they can out of this country. Everybody.
No,
so important.
Very well put. Well, the next question, this is one directly for you, Steve, and it comes on the point Dawn's just made about Kemi. One of the questions we got was that Kemi's been accused of making several blunders and outspoken comments in her career. Recently, there was the discussion about maternity pay, woke culture wars. Well, the question was, is she being genuine, or are these simply shock jocks to get attention? I wonder what's your thoughts on that?
Kemi has been in the headlines. She has had, should we say, rows with media? What should we say? And there was some comments made, but I think it's, you know, Kemi is a particular type of politician who says it how it is. You know, she will speak her mind. You know, she will cross lines, and she will raise topics which do need to be debated. And I think, you know, sometimes media, as I've experienced and we've all experienced, media will clip certain things and then they'll add their own bits to it as well, and then make sort of more out of a story than is actually there. But I think, you know, Kemi is a very unique politician. We saw how she spoke on the hustings a couple of weeks ago, and she came over exceptionally well, very genuine. But she's also prepared to open up debates on topics which some people might not be, you know, brave enough to go near. So that's where Kemi comes from on that.
And Stephen Barrett, now's your chance.
Well, so I think that this country has been living through a period of far too much shame peddling. I think there's been far too much shame. And now that we've got a left-wing government, it's really obvious to see that the shame is 99% directed at politicians on the right. I mean, what this Labour government is getting away with is absolutely outrageous. It's just given away the Chagos Islands without consulting the islanders, against the wishes of the islanders, to, as far as the islanders are concerned, foreigners who are just going to build a load of hotels on their pristine atolls. That's absolutely disgraceful. They're taking actions that will cause pensioners to die this winter. Absolutely disgraceful. Yet where is the shame peddled at them? Nowhere. Nobody's doing it. And I'm not saying that the answer is to throw a load of shame at the left. I think the answer is for us to get a backbone. And whenever one of us is attacked, let's not join the mob and start whooping and pointing fingers at our own. And instead, maybe it's time for us to circle the wagons and defend each other. Because once they've come for one of us, they're going to come for the rest of us. You know, there's no... Churchill says, you know, the appeaser is the man who feeds the crocodile, hoping it will eat him last. And, you know, we must not appease these people. They are shame peddlers. They have nothing productive to offer our country. If we believe we do have productive things to offer our country, then we must stick together and not worry too much about people, whether it's Robert or Kemi, who get the finger of shame pointed at them today or tomorrow. I don't care. We've got to sort of toughen up.
I agree. And I think one of the things that Vote Watch is going to be doing over the coming weeks and months is really saying things as they are and holding the Labour government to account. Because, as you say, so often the left get away with stuff which, if it were a Tory, would be seeking resignations, apologies. You know, so absolutely what we've got to do, no matter who the winner is get behind them and really start holding this Labour government to account. The next question actually is one for you now, Dawn. One of the biggest issues facing our country right now is immigration. We've all seen the videos of the boats coming across, now going up, and we've had more in the last few months since Labour won the government than the entire Conservative Party had before the election was in 2024. So the question is, the Conservatives seem to constantly promise to reduce immigration and stop the boats coming, but never deliver. What do you believe needs to be done? And do you think your chosen candidate will finally do it? So what's your thoughts?
Wow. I think this is multifaceted. And I think that's the issue that the Conservative government have with it. And I think it's the issue that any government's going to have with it. Because what you've got to do is you've got to balance our own moral positioning in our own minds when we read something. So, for example, if people are crossing generally, that thank goodness there aren't many children in those boats. But as somebody who lost their father in the English Channel when I was 3 years old, I know how dangerous that water is, and it's one of the busiest shipping channels in the world, in fact. So I feel, and this may be right or wrong, and I hope that they don't edit that in the edit, because I really do feel it could be right or wrong what I'm about to say. But from a person who has suffered with that and grown up knowing that water took my father's life, I think anyone who assists in that, not just the smugglers, anyone who assists with that or encourages it, is complicit in the deaths of the people that lose their lives in the water. It's completely irresponsible. So,
but how are we going to stop this then? That's the point is, how are we going to stop this? Because we've seen the numbers go up.
So what I'd say is
get a grip of it.
If I'm in a yacht in the English Channel and I get into trouble, and I'm a French yacht, and somebody helps me from the Royal National Lifeboat, which they do. I mean, Google it, happens all the time. They're incredible people. They're not just helping people in the Channel, migrants in the Channel. They're helping people all over the coast of this country and from the middle line off the coast of France. They do not take those people to Folkestone when that yacht's in trouble. That is not what happens. They will take them back, with consent, of course. They will take them back to the port if it's not too far from where they've been found. So that's the bit I don't get. I don't understand why, prior to the point where they're in the really seriously dangerous water, which is the middle bit, the middle of the Channel, why somebody isn't stopping them before they get to that point and taking them back to France. Now, if that, we can obviously do that with the consent of the French government. It can only be the French government that's stopping us doing that.
No, well, these are all good questions to put forward to now the Labour government to give us some answers. Stephen Barrett, what do you think needs to be done? Are we gripping this issue properly, or do we need something more?
No, we're not gripping this issue properly, and we're looking weak and particularly childlike. I mean, if you don't have any borders, if you don't have a door on your front door, you are just a constant victim. You know, if you don't have any boundaries, if you know somebody can come and take your clothes off, then you are just a victim. You are a person with low self-esteem who has no ability to set boundaries and protect themselves. There are a number of policy options that we could do. I mean, could we please point out that this government, in order to help the government of Mauritius, to whom they're not an ally, but in order to help the government of Mauritius, we are taking refugees from the Chagos Islands and putting them on St. Helena. So we could take refugees from England and put them on St. Helena. That's not impossible. So offshoring is an obvious option. I think pushback is much more of an option. I think that you need to be way more muscular in how you deal with other countries, particularly France in this instance. But there are a number of options. Obviously, some of them are more severe than others. There's a sliding scale of severity. But what we're doing at the moment is nothing. And that can't go on. It's not sustainable. It's just... Yeah.
No, I completely agree. And, you know, I've been very outspoken about how the fact that the French, for example, take nearly £500 million a year from us and seemingly point people in our direction. I mean, Steve Tuckwell, obviously you were a member of Parliament as the Rwanda plan and all these sorts of things were being pushed through. What's your thoughts on it? Are we serious enough about this? Does Kemi have a plan to stop the boats?
Well, I think I remember those Rwanda debates very late into the evening in Parliament with, I won't say fondness, but I certainly remember the debates. And I think the reason why we had such a disastrous general election is because, you know, the previous government just didn't grip immigration, and hasn't gripped it for a very long time. Yeah, I don't know enough about what treaties say and what things can happen and can't happen in the Channel in relation to returning people. But I do know that this is a common problem, not just for the United Kingdom, but across the entire European continent, and indeed further afield into the United States as well. You know, I've got family that are Malta in earlier this year, and the conversation around the dinner tables in homes in Malta is about the amount of immigration over there as well. And I know it's the same in Greece, it's the same in Spain, it's the same in Italy. It feels like, you know, the whole world is on the move, and the whole world needs to work together to grip it. You know, so it is a very complex and challenging problem. That I'm pretty sure that the previous government could have done more to resolve it, and unfortunately didn't, which has led to us now being in opposition with a very, very small amount of MPs.
I think that's very humble of you to say as well, obviously as a former MP too. Look, we are eating through our time, and I still have a plethora of questions to get through. So I'm going to really ask if we can keep answers short. We'll try and race through these as quick as we can, if that's all right. So the next topic is on the NHS. It's a very simple question. Does the NHS need more money, or does it need restructure and reform? What's your candidates going to do about it? Let's go to Dawn first.
Definitely restructure and reform.
No
100% not more money. Well, because I've got family who work in the NHS. I've got a sister who's a senior midwife. You know, I'm not going to list my family because they may or may not approve of me saying what they do in the NHS. One of them is very senior. But the reality is there's enormous amounts of wastage in the NHS. If you ask the nurses, if you ask the really hard working people that are working in the hospitals, and also those are sort of what we would have called an auxiliary in my day, but those people cleaning up, shaping up, taking the time to talk to the patients, they will tell you that the wastage is absolutely phenomenal. And there's rules around that which are not necessarily about patient safety or hygiene. It's foolhardy. You know, why do you buy a pack of 6 of something which, once you've opened it, all individual packets, has to be thrown away because it's a new patient? Well, the argument for NHS buying is, well, we do that because we get a bit of a discount if it's a multi-pack. But if you're only going to use one, don't buy the multi-pack. Pay a bit more and buy the individual units. And if you take that all the way across the NHS, whether it's looking after the elderly, women who've just had babies, whatever it is, believe me, you're going to save an awful lot of money.
I read somewhere that the NHS burns through £1 million every 4 minutes. So in the space of this discussion already, we've burned through several £1 million in the NHS. I mean, Steve Tuckwell, one of the policies for your by-election victory was the rebuild of the Hillingdon Hospital. The NHS is something that is deeply rooted in your community and was in your constituency. Do you feel like it needs that reform, or is money simply the problem? Throw money at a problem.
No, and the disappointment for me locally is that the Hillingdon Hospital is now under review and is at risk of actually not happening now. So that's again, thanks to our new government. But I think ever since I've been old enough to vote, which is quite a long time now, every government of different colours has been throwing more and more money into the NHS, and every single time it's always about more money, more money, more money. It is the biggest sponge we've ever seen, and I think, you know, Kemi is very clear that, you know, there needs to be productivity increases. There needs to be probably, you know, shaving out of management layers, not having as many consultants. You know, I mean, it's about management consultants, not medical consultants. To ensure that we get that productivity and care right, but we also need to have it some, you know, an end-to-end pipeline so that we haven't got hospitals blocked up. You know, so there's an element there about, you know, helping local councils with social care responsibilities to sort of open up that pipeline. So, you know, it doesn't need, you know, endless, you know, billions of pounds in cash every single year. Every single government is always committed to putting in more and more into the NHS. We never seem to be seeing, you know, value-added improvements. I've had some recent experiences of Norfolk Park, Matthew, not far from your part of the world, and I could see then, you know, the amount of inefficiency that is, you know, the way of working that's just there from day to day, which is costing us as taxpayers billions of pounds every year. So it definitely needs reform, needs to be an improvement in productivity as well.
Stephen, I can see that you're shaking your head in agreement. I presume you're on the side of reform, not more money for the NHS.
Yeah, I don't think there's much for me to add.
No, well, thank you very much, because it means we can move on to the next topic. As many of you know, crime across the country has been falling, except in Sadiq Khan's London, where knife crime, for example, massively outweighs the national average. The question is, what needs to be done, and what will your candidate do? Dawn, I'll come to you first.
I'm not going to lie about this. I've got absolutely no idea what Robert would do about it. I know that he feels very strongly that Sadiq Khan has turned it into his own fiefdom, and that London effectively, and I'm not quoting Robert on this, I think both candidates actually, to be fair to them both, feel exactly the same way. You know, what's going on there is wrong. And uh, I don't know what the answer to that is. You know, it's got to a point a little bit from my point of view where I feel like I'd rather not have a mayor of London than have somebody like Sadiq Khan. And
I
that
think
makes
that would
me
be a
very
very
sad.
I think that would be a very popular opinion. Steve Tuckwell, obviously, the Uxbridge police station was a big issue in your constituency.
Yeah.
Was part of the stations that Sadiq Khan was going to close, then contemplated reopening during the by-election, and then as soon as you won, decided to continue with the closure. I mean, what's your thoughts on crime, not only in London, but also the politicisation of crime as well?
Yeah, and the police station's still closed, Matthew, as well. So that's another story for another day. And I think Kemi's approach to this is one. You know, we need to be holding senior police officers to account. You know, the Metropolitan Police, as you mentioned there, failed on all of its recruitment targets, and you know hasn't invested in recruitment. I know there are challenges in London with recruitment, but it's the only police force in the country that failed its recruitment target. And there's no way of getting away from the fact that crime in London is actually going up when the rest of the country crime is actually going down. So Kemi's very clear on this in relation to holding police officers to account and avoiding two-tier policing in all levels to make sure that we have consistent policing, you know, not just for London, but for across the whole country. And she's very, very clear on that.
And Stephen Barrett, I mean, two-tier policing, crime across the country, are these things that you recognise and that you see are happening in the Britain that we all live in today?
Yes, and everything that's true is everything you're not allowed to say. And the reason you're not allowed to say it is
very
because it's
careful
true.
what we all say next. We might all get banged up for several months.
This is just visible, and really what's happening in the state is that we've never spent more money on the state before, and we've never had worse service in my lifetime, I don't think. And it's across the board. There's a lack of accountability, so we do need accountability back, but there's also a lack of the sense that this is the job of politicians to fix. There's a desperate sort of outsourcing of everything. And I think one of the key components of being a conservative is to never be ideological and to always be pragmatic. And that means sometimes the state has to take direct control of something and do it, and maybe even nationalize a thing. And sometimes you do outsource and you do use privatization. But it's almost like at the moment, we just need to really look at everything in a lot of detail and get an absolute grip on what is failing. I'm not convinced that crime is falling in the rest of the country. I think people are just giving up on recording it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good point.
The failure to investigate burglaries, the failure to do anything about things like stolen mobile phones. We will all have a mate who's got this story where, you know, I turned on the tracking system and they still wouldn't go to the address. It's just, the country is falling apart and it needs serious, you know, restructuring, let's say that, to avoid the other R word.
No. Well, we're going to come on to the other R word now, because the next question, conveniently sent in from someone in Clacton, is about reform. What would your candidate do with reform? Would you support a merger, or do you think the Tories need to go win their votes elsewhere? Steve Tuckwell, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, I think, you know, Kemi has said time and time again that in various interviews that, you know, her approach will be to reach out to former Conservative voters who have moved on to reform. And I'm a victim of that. 6,500 votes in this constituency went to reform in the general election. And here I am talking to you as a former MP as on the back of that. So, you know, we need to be making sure that we are really, you know, as Stephen and Dawn have both alluded to, you know, getting back to those traditional conservative values, which will then attract back those people who have flirted with reform. You know, reform are not the answer. They point at problems, they shout at problems, you know, without any real substance or policy. So we need to be making sure that we are attracting our voters back. Kemi is the person to do that. You know, there are going to be no conversations about inviting Nigel to join the party. And I think she said at the GB News hustings, why would you invite someone in to want to burn your house? They'll burn your church down, I think was the expression she used. So, You know, that's what I think Kemi will be doing, and I think she is ideally positioned to be able to attract those Conservative voters back to us.
I'll take that over to you, Dawn. So, Kemi, not having a deal with reform. Is Jenrick having a deal with reform?
I want to speak for both of them on this, actually. I think we're in, well, I can't speak for them, but this is how I see it. On a daily basis, I look at our party and I look at our candidates and what's being said, and whether I support Kemi or not, being somebody who's supporting Jenrick, I think that both candidates appreciate the fact that with something they're talking about now, they need to be fluid about it. And moving forward, reserve the right to change their mind or how they're going to be dealing with the situation. Because, you know, tempers are high at the moment. Reform says this, a Conservative says that. Well, do you know something? We're the right. And the only way we're going to survive this is if we all come together. And I think it is delusional to believe that you're going to get all those Reform members to suddenly, once we decide which candidate we've got, to jump back on board and start voting Conservative again and start paying for a membership. I honestly don't believe that's going to happen. So I think with both candidates, regardless of which is lucky enough to become our leader, and I do think that's an honour, by the way, to be made leader of our party, huge honour, comes with massive responsibility. I would like to see both of them reserve the right, as such situations change, to be fluid about the situation with reform and maybe other policies. And I think that's the grown-up way for us to look at it.
No, Stephen, you've got to say the R word now. Reform, what do we do about it? What would you like to see done about it?
So I'm a great defender of first past the post, and I think first past the post forces this. First past the post will not keep political parties alive. Sometimes a political party will die. We saw that with the Liberal Party last century. And I don't want this party to die. There's something else that has traditionally arisen because of first past the post in our constitutional system, which is it's not the Labour Party. It's the Labour and Cooperative Party. We're not the Conservative Party. We're the Conservative and Unionist Party. Now, the Unionist bit is probably, I mean, that doesn't mean the policy's gone, but nobody would really sort of think that as a different group or organisation now. So perhaps it's just time in the grand electoral cycle for the Conservative and something else party. And however that's discussed, I think either candidate is going to have to deal with reform. I mean, Nigel's not going anywhere, and by God, he's a political force. I was on a panel with Richard Tice a few days ago, and just as a cheap debating trick, I pointed out to the audience that he's incredibly charming. But it's true, he is incredibly charming. That's a problem as well. So I just point out that whatever position they take now in order for the leadership, you know, and I think that's a different issue. Dealing with reform is a long-term project. And, you know, constitutional flag, you can have the Conservative and something party.
So the Conservative and Reform Party, two oxymorons in the same sentence. How would we, we'll have to put that out to a think group or something and see what they come back at. No, thank you very much. I think that's really interesting. The next question is on the topic of winter fuel payments. Now, just to remind everyone watching that early into this new Labour government, the surprise decision was made to scrap universal winter fuel payments of around £200 to £300 for almost 10 million pensioners and to means test the payment instead. This has drawn widespread criticism as the means testing questionnaire is mostly online and is 243 questions long, meaning many find it difficult to complete. Charities such as Age UK and big names such as Martin Lewis and the lefty lover Carol Vorderman have called on Keir Starmer to reconsider. But the question to our panel is, what are your thoughts on Labour's scrapping of the universal winter fuel payments, and should the next leader restore them? I'll go to Steve Tuckwell first.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. And yeah, this topic is still rumbling on locally and nationally. You know, we discussed it in local councils, and a lot of local councils have discussed, because guess who has to step in now to cover what's been lost with the winter fuel payments? It is going to be local authorities at time when local authorities are stretched. So, you know, I think Again, it's a disastrous decision, knee-jerk reaction. Yes, there needs to be some critical look at how the payments are made and who they go to. There are a number of pensioners who are quite wealthy who wouldn't be entitled to this payment, but to really just sort of like, you know, sheep dip the whole thing, and not actually have it very easy for pensioners to apply for. You know, there's going to be a lot of cold pensioners this winter, and the fact is there wasn't an impact assessment done, you know, to determine what the impact was going to be. It's just laughable that this government has gone down this route.
Well, Stephen Barrett, I mean, this is exactly what we were talking about earlier, something that Labour are pushing through, that if it were the Tories would be an utter scandal, and we probably have gone through another Prime Minister by now. I mean, how have Labour been able to get away with this, Stephen?
Well, if the Conservatives were doing this, I'd have exactly the same things to say to them, which is that this is a monstrous evil and it must not happen. Again, being a Conservative does mean that you're pragmatic and not ideological. If you're ideological on the right, you say, oh, the state should never give away money, and, you know, all of that stuff, and you sort of enjoy this. But it's like, no. I mean, there is a fundamental basic decency. And I remember, I grew up working class, so I had a nan and a gran, and my gran bought her a council house, but my nan didn't manage to buy hers. My nan would not have been able to fill in the form, and my gran would have been too proud to fill in the form because she would have thought that it was begging. And so neither of them would have got the payments, and they'd be cold this winter. And people are going to die, and this is just evil. Now, I'm lucky enough to know some very wealthy pensioners, and I know that some of them just give it back to HMRC, some of them give it to charities. If you just ran a campaign saying, please, will you give it back? I'm sure they all will take it off the poor ones. I'm sure they would. This is absolute civil service madness. And what keeps happening with this government is civil service policy is enacted, not necessarily what this government said it was going to vote for or do. So this has been a Treasury policy for years, and every government for 14 years has said, don't do it. This is ridiculous. You'll just hurt old people. The Chagos Islands has been Foreign Commonwealth Office policy. It's not really Lammy's policy, it's their policy. And we're seeing this. This is government by the civil service for the civil service, and it's going to fail. But this is just evil.
I have said ever since the day Labour got in that they lied to the British public, and if they had put all of these in their manifesto, giving up the Chagos Islands, taking away the universal winter fuel payments, upping your taxes to record levels, and probably going to unleash a whole load of stealth taxes in the budget. If Labour had been honest, they would not have won the general election. The British public wouldn't have voted that, regardless of how bad the Conservative Party was. I mean, Dawn, what's your thoughts on not only the winter fuel payments, but just the hypocrisy of it all?
I feel like this isn't real. It's not just the odd thing happening. Every single day I wake up and think, what scandal is it going to be today? Which friend or partner of somebody's just got a job for 100,000 working, in the government, 9% pay increase being talked about for civil servants, but taking the winter fuel payment away. I mean, do they honestly believe, do the Labour Party honestly believe that those civil servants sitting in our local offices now would rather take their 9% pay increase and take money away from an elderly person? I mean, they're the people that are in contact with the elderly who, by the way, are not that flush and most suffering anyway. They can apply and fight to get grips to get in their bath for years, just so they can use the facilities in their own house or their council house. This is monstrous. But it doesn't feel real. It's so bad that it doesn't feel real.
It is one of the most shocking things that I have seen announced and came from nowhere. So thank you to all of you. I mean, the anger from yourselves is one that I and others have felt from the minute this was announced. So as soon as we saw that question, we thought we've got to ask it. Moving to maybe a bit more trickier question, very topical at the moment, is the question about reparations for slavery. Should the next leader of the Conservative Party, if they become Prime Minister, agree to pay them or not? And this comes in context of obviously the Commonwealth leaders meeting taking place over the last few days, and seeing Caribbean islands getting together and asking for upwards to £19 trillion in reparations. 19 trillion. I mean, Labour talk about a £22 billion black hole, which they then won't provide the details of. I wonder what's the What's the thoughts here? Should Britain be paying reparations? Should our new leader be saying that's the direction we're going to go to? And then how much should we be paying? I'll come to Steve Tuckwell first.
Yeah, I think certainly the new leader, no to any form of reparations. And I think the only reason why this has come about is because we've got a foreign secretary who has said in the past that he is in favour of reparations, and we should be paying a compensation for events that happened over 200 years ago. So I'll keep it short, but my answer to that is absolutely not. But the only reason we're here is because of David Lammy, and he is an absolute disaster of a foreign secretary.
So quoting Thatcher with no, no, no. Dawn, Melvin.
Well, another situation where I feel I'm living in the twilight zone. One of my grandchildren, his father's Nigerian, and my other little grandson, who's only sort of 5 weeks old now, his father's from India. So for all those people out there that want to hit me with the race card, don't even go there, right? Just don't even think about it. The situation that we've got now has, I believe, come about. I don't know whether Keir Starmer was or was not a good barrister. I've no idea. Didn't instruct him, never worked for me. So I'm not in a position to judge that. But what I am in a position to do, as somebody who had a mediocre to good education, is I'm horrified by the lack of intelligence that anyone discussing this in the Labour government has. They clearly didn't do history at school. And if they did, they weren't listening. They've no ability to learn the true facts behind where we are now. And in fact, what a vile little bowl this is going to open if they start pushing this. Because I don't want anyone throwing nasty accusations at Africa or people that lived there hundreds of years ago about what they did to their own people. I don't. And I don't want them doing that about India or anywhere else. So do you know something? They need to stop opening this because much as we can look at the history behind it, and you'll have people one side saying, yes, well, we want reparations because this is what happened. Well, you know what? Go off and learn about 1,600 vessels that were saved. Learn about 150,000 slaves that were saved. Learn about the 17,000 sailors, which included black sailors, by the way, not just white sailors, black sailors that lost their lives in combat or to disease whilst they were trying to free slaves. You know, people need to just educate themselves a little bit more, I think. They really do. And for my grandson's sake, both of my grandsons' sake, I think they need to stop hurling things at anyone anymore about this. Otherwise, they're not going to grow up with a guilt thing about, well, I'm British, therefore I have to hold responsibility for this. They're going to grow up with thinking, well, I'm Indian, so I have to bear responsibility here, or I'm African, so I have to bear responsibility here for what my ancestors did. We need to leave this where it is.
Well, Stephen Barrett, are you going to apologise for something that happened before you were born? Should any of us apologise for something that happened before we were born?
No, and that's the absurdity. And human societies fall into this trap quite a lot, which is why you'll find in quite a few holy books, including in the Bible, that there is no such things as the son is not responsible for the sins of the father. And that's wise and sage advice, because the minute you go down this road, you can always find some grievance and some wrong that was committed hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, that you can then use as an excuse now for your hatred and your anger and your shame peddling. And really, I've talked a bit about shame and shame-based control. That's what's going on here. And it's just that this government hasn't got a backbone and hasn't got the slightest ability to survive being shamed. That's why he bent the knee. Okay, that's why he did it, because he doesn't have the moral strength to go, I'm not a racist. Well, he's terrified of people calling him a racist, but he doesn't have the moral fiber to just know in himself, do you know what, I'm not a racist. Which is what I never worry about it. I'm not a racist. It's not even any way tricky. But they give into shame-based control constantly. And the more you do it, the more people come back. And it's just going to get worse.
Well, I mean, I feel like we've been pretty united on this call, which makes the final question even more interesting. The Tories have been engaged in toxic infighting for a long time, and now the country is suffering a Labour government because of it. Do you feel that after this leadership race, and like we've done today, can the party finally get its act together, unite, and be a solid opposition to the Labour government? Steve Tuckwell, former Member of Parliament, in Parliament when everything was going on, did you at times feel slightly fed up and knew that this would hit you on the doorstep?
I think I alluded to it earlier on when the press kept asking me which of the 5 families I was in, and I think it's now time for, we've had a very bruising, disastrous election result, the worst in our history. If that isn't enough to sober us up, to get behind whoever wins, whether it be Robert, whether it be Kemi, then nothing will. And I think the other thing to look at here is the 6 candidates who we started out with, that they've all got skills and experience in certain areas.
Yeah.
And I think now is the time for all of those 6, plus others that we know of, to get into shadow cabinet, get organised, get the Conservative principles back on the agenda, and really push forward with the challenges that we face nationally and indeed globally as well. This government, as we know, has had a disastrous start, but they will get organised. They will find their mojo over the next couple of years. And we can't keep pointing at Labour's problems and Labour's gaffes. We need to be having our own message, and we need to be having our own policies, and we need to have our own vision for the country, not just how bad Labour are. So whoever wins next Saturday, I'm going to be getting right behind them, and I'll be asking every Conservative member, every Conservative former MP, every Conservative MP to do exactly the same thing. But I think what was said earlier on is we need to be fluid here and have the right to change our minds as well, because things will be fluid in front of us.
Completely agree. And Dawn, you, like we've been very outspoken on Twitter X about things that we're unhappy with. We love our haters. This question, I feel, will resonate with you a bit. Is the Conservative Party going to unite? Is Robert Jenrick going to be able to unite the party? Or are we, if we couldn't manage a party, how can we manage the government?
I think Robert, well, no, I don't think he can. I know he can unite the party, but I also am absolutely with Steve and Stephen on this, and so many people that are not here today, whether it's, Cllr from Conservative Post. We've got some really good generals, some fantastic resources here, and we can beat Labour. And in the meantime, until we have beaten them, we can hold them to account, but in a very professional way. I don't want to see childish tweets by CCHQ. I don't want to see it. It sickens me. We're supposed to show people that we're the grown-ups. We're talking sense. Listen to us. And then we have a ridiculous childish tweet taking the mickey out of a Labour MP. It is completely and utterly unacceptable. That's what they did to us. We're the grown-ups. Okay? And we won't make anybody like us more by being rude about the other guy in a childish tweet.
No, very well.
I want to see that stopped, and I want to see whoever wins bring all their generals in. And by the way, some of our retired generals. I'd very much like to see some of the MPs that weren't lucky enough to retain their seats brought back in and help in any way, shape or form they can within this party.
I'm loving the military analogies. It's fantastic. And you're completely right. A massive issue that people have raised is about CCHQ. I mean, many people don't even know what the structure of CCHQ is, and looking at reforming that and bringing members into it and opening it up to the party. I mean, Stephen Barrett, I'll go to you for the last say on this. Destroyed Conservative Party, utterly divided. Is there any way you can put this happy family back together?
They must. And the victor must. And because I'm neutral on who it is who wins, I can say this advice to both of them, which is that you will only do that by reaching across. You will only do that through forgiveness and trying to find matters that connect us rather than matters that divide us. You know, we can all sit down with somebody and find a reason to hate them if we really want to, or we can sit down with somebody and find a reason to come together and, oh, actually, they're quite good at that. You know, they're quite sound on that issue. You know, and we can do that internally within the party. And I think it has to happen. Genuinely, I think we have seen multiple administrations, including the current administration in the Labour government, made up of small cliques that only reward the people in them. Now, that's running like a cult. It means you start from day one in the bunker. It means you incentivize everyone to leak against you and to say nasty things against you, because they're like, well, I'm not going to get anything anyway, so I may as well just have you're bringing about your own destruction. You're encouraging it. And that's not what we need. Once this leader's in place, we need them in place for a long time. So they need to be somebody who can bring everybody together, forgive, you know, incentivize people to support you rather than to attack you.
Well, thank you very much. And that's unfortunately all that we've got time for. We've gone through as many of them as I could. Do not worry, though. VoteWatch is going to bring everything it can until the result is announced, and right when it is on November the 2nd. But meanwhile, have your say on who you think should win, Kemi or Jenrick, by voting in our poll on Twitter X that will be below, and carrying on the discussion there, because I know I will be with my tweets. But I just want to say a massive thank you to our team, to Councillor Stephen Tuckwell, Dawn Melvin and Stephen Barrett. A massive thank you for your time, and a big thank you for everyone for sending their questions in advance. Don't forget to click, subscribe, like, and send this around to everyone you can. I've been Matthew Goodwin-Freeman. Good night.